Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the latest Tory meltdown as Boris Johnson throws a proper strop and drops his former colleagues in the Cabinet Office right in it with the judge who is demanding records for her COVID inquiry. Plenty of people said it at the time, but the Conservatives are going to rue the day that they allowed the blonde buffoon to lead their party. I suspect many already are. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I discussed this on the Labour social stream this morning as well. How could I not? This is easily the most explosive political news story of the week. But I want to add in a few extra details here as well. So this latest Johnson tantrum sort of got started this week when I gather Oliver Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister, called off a meeting which was to involve Sunak and Johnson. It was billed as clearing the air, but I said earlier this week I didn't believe a word of it. But Dowden was unhappy that Johnson was blaming him for the incriminating diary entries finding their way to the police. In reality, it is entirely possible that Oliver Dowden knew nothing about it. He is the minister in charge of the Cabinet Office, sure, but civil servants are under a very strict duty to report evidence of a crime to the police, not the Tory crime lord running their department. But even if they had informed Dowden, oh, by the way, Mr. Dowden, we found some incriminating evidence in the former Prime Minister's diaries. We're just going to hand it to the police. The correct response from him would have simply to have been said, oh, noted, thank you for telling me. He could not interfere with the potential criminal investigation. So when Dowden says he was unhappy, and by unhappy I mean so deeply unhappy he called the meeting off. Dowden says he was unhappy to be blamed by Johnson for being involved in the handover of the diary to the police. What he's really saying is he's unhappy to be accused of not trying to conceal a crime. Can you imagine? How dare you, sir? How very dare you accuse me of not trying to cover up crimes? I am a proud Tory MP. The very idea that I have principles or respect for the rule of law is a grave insult. I must demand that you apologise immediately, or it will be your choice of swords or pistols at dawn, sir. Which should actually, if he'd have said that, given Johnson pause for thought, because these days, let's be honest, he presents a somewhat less challenging target for both sword or pistol. But with the Deputy Prime Minister throwing a tantrum in the background, the head of the COVID inquiry, former Judge Baroness Hallett, was demanding that the Cabinet Office hand over a load of records that she'd been asking for and they hadn't been handed over, at least not in unredacted form. They were just basically sending blank pages to her. So she's been threatening legal action if they don't comply. Now, legal experts seem to be of the view that if she takes the government to court, the government will probably lose. Not certain, but probably lose. Then not only will she get the records she needs, but the government would look very dodgy in trying to conceal them. And as I mentioned in a previous video, destroying the records won't work. No civil servant's going to go to prison to save Boris Johnson's ponderous hide. Then the Cabinet Office claimed that they didn't have the records after all. It says, oh no, these records that we've been saying we're not going to give to you. Yeah, we don't actually have them. Now, I'm not sure how many people really believe this. Not only have they been sending across heavily redacted versions of records to the inquiry, thus proving they have at least some of them, but they were the ones who passed on Johnson's diaries to the police. Are we supposed to believe that they neglected to take copies? This is not how the civil service works. Besides, they sent the evidence to two different police forces, so copies must have been taken. So Baroness Hallett, who's obviously no mug, former judge, told the Cabinet Office, all right, you don't have them. That's very interesting, very interesting. Tell you what, then, you sign witness statements to that effect. You know, you sign witness statements making it clear that the Cabinet Office do not possess the records that I want. Because if they were telling the truth, no problems. Of course you'd sign it. Well, we don't have them. Of course I'll sign it. There you go. If they're lying, though, as soon as the truth comes out, and it will come out, they would be charged with perjury. And this will be a particularly serious case, so they will absolutely go to prison. Again, nobody in the Cabinet Office wants to go to prison for Boris Johnson. Or Rishi Sunak, come to that. So it was all building up into a nice little hot mess for Rishi Sunak. The Cabinet Office had a deadline extension from Hallett for it today at 4 p.m. They wanted next week, but she refused. Said, no, you can have Thursday at 4 p.m. That's good enough for you. 2 extra days, that's plenty. So I'm now waiting with bated breath for this afternoon when Boris Johnson enters the stage once again, like a pantomime villain, twirling his moustache and laughing malevolently. He announces that he's handed over all of the requested WhatsApp messages and notebooks to the Cabinet Office. So the Cabinet Office say, we don't have them. Sorry, Boris Johnson going, yeah, they have them. I gave them. He's then dared them to pass them on to Baroness Hallett. Well now, Boris Johnson's basically saying, I don't mind them seeing them. No, you pass them on. What Johnson has effectively done there is to say that if the Cabinet Office didn't have the information before, they do now. In fact, I gather he said that they've had it for months. I mean, of course, Johnson wasn't under oath when he made this statement. He could have been lying. He has been told to tell the odd fib. But it puts the Cabinet Office in a very difficult position, because now if they don't hand over the documents, they look even dodgier than they already did. Because as far as the public's concerned, Boris Johnson is complying fully with the inquiry. He's the one who was Prime Minister at the time. It's his records. He says he's handed over his stuff to the Cabinet Office for them to hand over to the inquiry. If the Cabinet Office want to insist that they don't have it at all, OK, the public will probably believe that Boris Johnson could be lying. But then why not sign the witness statements? And for those wondering why Johnson doesn't just hand over stuff directly to the inquiry itself, I imagine 2 reasons. First, I don't think he's actually handed anything over to the Cabinet Office. I think they've already got it. And he's just destroying their argument that they don't have it. But second, actually, it is the correct procedure to hand it to the Cabinet Office first. Because there might be some things that genuinely do need redacting. There might be things where there's national security at stake, but just not the level of redactions that the Cabinet Office have been carrying out. That is way more than is required for the purpose of national security. But there might still be some redactions that actually do, in all honesty, need to be made. You know, as these are government records, Johnson, I don't think, should even be entitled to just hand them over without government clearance. Do you remember when Matt Hancock handed over his to Isabel Oakeshott, like the least trustworthy person in journalism? That went down very badly. But then comes another question. Boris Johnson flipped his lid at his diaries being given to the police. So why is he fine with the similar records going to the COVID inquiry? Is it because there's nothing incriminating in there? No, I don't think that's credible. It's more likely that it's because, as I suggested earlier this week, they are so incriminating that Sunak and others will be in the frame for at least major reputational damage if they were to be released to a public inquiry being headed up by a judge. Otherwise, Johnson's gambit here would be an own goal. He must believe, and he's probably right, that Sunak is as desperate as Johnson to avoid Hallett getting hold of these records. What Johnson's attempted to do here is one of 2 things, really. One, make it look like he wants to cooperate with the inquiry if he thought the Cabinet Office were going to hand over the documents anyway. Like, Boris Johnson has no control over the process. If those documents get handed to the inquiry or blocked from the inquiry, it's got nothing to do with Boris Johnson. He is no longer in power. He cannot influence those events. So given that you've lost control over the situation, why try and resist? Your resistance is futile, as they say. And he may as well look like he wants the information to come out. It then makes it much easier for him to downplay it when it does. You know, he may have gotten word that officials were not going to be signing these witness statements, that they didn't have them, so will potentially get ready to submit them anyway, or he may just take the view that the judicial review will order them to be handed over. But the second possibility is that Johnson is confident that Sunak cannot let these records pass unredacted to a judge, and so is using the situation to undermine Sunak's credibility while boosting his own. Either way, what Johnson has done here is really stick the boot into the Tory leadership and, by extension, his party, his wider party. Because if Rishi Sunak suffers reputational damage, the whole party does, because he's leading it into the next election. You know, and whether it's because whatever's in these documents is dynamite, I mean, it must be dynamite. There must be something in there. If anything spicy were to be made public before the general election, that would be very bad for all involved and to the wider Conservative brand. Johnson is taking the view here that his reputation's sunk anyway, and he may as well bring down everyone else with him. You know, maybe make Sunak as unpopular as his party, as a lesson to them for slighting Boris Johnson, the world king. You know, plenty of us knew that Johnson was an incredibly selfish egomaniac who would think nothing of bringing the Conservative Party down with him. I suspect he only stepped down voluntarily last year because he thought he would be back by the end of the year. Remember his last words as Prime Minister in the House of Commons? Hasta la vista, he said. Now that he's seen that the party don't want him back, he's more than happy to bring them down to teach them a lesson. I would say expect more spiteful behaviour in the future. They will never stop suffering from his pathetic tantrums until they thoroughly disown him. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.